The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the bustling emergency room. I had just finished a grueling double shift and was about to head home when I heard the familiar beep of the ambulance bay doors opening. A stretcher rolled in, and my heart sank as I recognized the man on it. Hank, my husband. "Olivia, you need to see this," said Richard, my coworker, his voice tinged with urgency. I rushed over, my mind racing with questions. What happened? Why was he here? The paramedics were already briefing Dr. Patel. Found him unconscious at the park, possible head trauma, and some bruising on his torso. I took Hank's hand, feeling the cold sweat on his skin. "Hank, can you hear me? It's Olivia." His eyes fluttered open, but there was no recognition. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to maintain my composure. "We'll take it from here," Dr. Patel said, gently guiding me away from the stretcher. As they wheeled Hank into the treatment room, I noticed a woman huddled in the corner of the waiting area. She was knitting furiously, her fingers deftly working the needles. Something about her seemed oddly familiar, but I couldn't place it. Her eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "Do you know her?" Richard asked, following my gaze. "I'm not sure," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "But there's something about her." "Let's focus on Hank for now," Richard suggested, leading me to the observation window. I watched as the medical team worked on Hank, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. He had been distant lately, spending more time at his parents' house, or so he said. I had dismissed my suspicions, chalking it up to the stress of his job. But now, seeing him here, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. "Olivia, we need to talk," Dr. Patel said, breaking my reverie. "Hank's injuries are concerning, but he's stable for now. We need to run some tests to determine the extent of the damage." "Thank you, Dr. Patel," I said, my voice trembling. "Please do whatever you can." I turned to Richard, who had been a pillar of support throughout this ordeal. "I need to find out what happened," I said, determination hardening my resolve. "Let's start with that woman," Richard suggested, nodding toward the waiting area. "Maybe she knows something." We approached her cautiously, and as we got closer, I realized why she seemed familiar. She was the woman from the photo Hank had accidentally left on his phone a few months ago. "Eleanor." "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Do you know Hank Martin?" Eleanor looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Yes, I do. I'm a friend." "A friend?" I echoed, my suspicion growing. "What were you doing with him at the park?" She hesitated, her hands stilling on the knitting needles. "We were just talking. He needed someone to talk to." "About what?" Richard interjected, his tone more forceful. Eleanor's eyes darted between us, and she seemed to shrink under our scrutiny. "I don't think it's my place to say. Listen, my husband is lying in there with serious injuries," I said, my voice rising. "If you know something, you need to tell us." Eleanor took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. "Hank and we've been seeing each other. He was going to leave you, Olivia. He just didn't know how to tell you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I staggered back, feeling Richard's steadying hand on my shoulder. "You're lying," I whispered, but deep down I knew it was true. "I'm sorry," Eleanor said, her voice breaking. "I never wanted it to end like this." I turned away, my mind reeling from the revelation. Hank had been living a double life, and I had been blind to it. The woman I had seen as a mere acquaintance was, in fact, the thread that had unraveled my marriage. "Olivia, we need to get back to Hank," Richard said gently, guiding me away. As we walked back to the observation window, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The hidden facade of my life had been shattered, and the twisted thread of deceit was unraveling before my eyes. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, my mind a jumble of emotions. Richard had insisted I take a break, but every fiber of my being wanted to be by Hank's side, demanding answers. The revelation of his affair with Eleanor had left me reeling, But there was something else gnawing at me. The frequent visits to his parents. Something didn't add up. I pulled out my phone and dialed Martha and Edward's number. Martha answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Olivia, dear. How are you?" "Martha, I need to ask you something," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Has Hank been visiting you and Edward a lot lately?" There was a pause on the other end, followed by a confused chuckle. "No, dear. We haven't seen Hank in weeks. Is everything all right?" My heart sank. "Yes, everything's fine. Just checking in." "Thanks, Martha." I hung up, my mind racing. Hank had been lying about visiting his parents. But why? And where had he been going instead? My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "Hank's awake. Come back to the ER." I rushed back to the emergency room, my thoughts swirling with questions. Hank lay on the hospital bed, looking pale and disoriented. Richard stood by his side, a concerned look on his face. "Olivia," Hank croaked, his voice barely audible. I forced myself to stay calm. "Hank, what happened? Why were you at the park?" He looked away, his eyes filled with guilt. I don't remember." "Don't remember?" I repeated, my frustration boiling over. "You were found unconscious with bruises, Hank. And Eleanor was there. She told me everything." Hank's eyes widened in shock. "Eleanor? She was there." "Yes, she was," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "And she told me about your affair. How long has this been going on, Hank?" He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "A few months," he admitted. "But it's over now. I swear." I felt a bitter laugh escape my lips. "Over? You expect me to believe that? You've been lying to me about everything, even visiting your parents." Hank's face paled further. "Olivia, please. I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "That you've been lying to me, cheating on me, and making a fool out of me?" Richard stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Olivia, maybe we should give him some time to rest." I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, I need answers." Hank's eyes filled with tears. "I never meant to hurt you, Olivia. I was confused, and Eleanor was... She was just a distraction." "A distraction?" I echoed, my voice breaking. "You destroyed our marriage for a distraction?" Before Hank could respond, Dr. Patel entered the room. "I'm sorry, but we need to run some more tests. Hank needs to rest." I nodded numbly, allowing Richard to guide me out of the room. As we walked down the hallway, I felt a mix of anger, betrayal, and confusion. "Olivia, you need to take care of yourself," Richard said gently. "This is a lot to process." "I know," I replied, my voice hollow. "But I can't just sit back and do nothing. I need to find out the truth." Richard nodded in understanding. "We'll figure this out together. You're not alone in this." As we reached the hospital entrance, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my emotions. "I need to go home and see if I can find any clues. There has to be something." "I'll come with you," Richard offered. "You shouldn't be alone right now." I nodded, grateful for his support. As we drove to my house, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. Hank's lies ran deeper than I had ever imagined, and I was determined to uncover the truth. When we arrived home, I headed straight to Hank's office, Richard close behind. I rifled through his desk drawers, searching for anything that might explain his behavior. My hands trembled as I opened a locked drawer with the spare key I had found in his nightstand. Inside, I found a stack of letters, all addressed to Hank from Eleanor. My heart pounded as I read through them, each one revealing more about their affair. But it was the last letter that sent a chill down my spine. "Hank, we need to talk. I can't keep this secret any longer. Meet me at the park tomorrow. Eleanor." I showed the letter to Richard, my hands shaking. "This is it. This is why he was at the park." Richard's eyes widened as he read the letter. "Olivia, we need to find out what this secret is." I nodded, my resolve hardening. The cracks in Hank's facade were widening, and I was determined to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Back at the hospital, I couldn't shake the image of Hank's pale, guilt-ridden face from my mind. But the letters I found at home were even more damning. Eleanor had hinted at a secret so grave that it had driven Hank to meet her at the park. What could be so significant that it warranted such secrecy? As I walked through the hospital corridors, my phone buzzed. It was Laura, my trusted attorney and friend. "Olivia, I heard about Hank. Are you okay?" "Laura, I need your help," I said, my voice trembling. "I found letters from Eleanor to Hank. She mentioned a secret they were keeping. I need to know what it is." "Come to my office," Laura replied. "We'll figure this out together." I made my way to Laura's office, my mind racing with possibilities. Laura greeted me with a warm hug, her presence a comforting anchor in the storm of my emotions. "Let's sit down and go through everything," she said, guiding me to a chair. I handed her the letters, watching as she read through them, her brow furrowing in concentration. "This is serious, Olivia," she said finally. "We need to find out what this secret is. It could be crucial for your case." "How do we do that?" I asked, feeling a surge of determination. "We start by talking to Eleanor," Laura said. "She holds the key to this mystery." Back at the hospital, I found Eleanor in the waiting area, her knitting abandoned on her lap. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. Eleanor looked up, her eyes filled with apprehension. "I told you everything I know," she said, her voice shaky. "No, you didn't," I replied, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "What is this secret you and Hank were keeping?" Eleanor's eyes widened in panic. I can't tell you." "You have to," I insisted. "If you care about Hank at all, you'll tell me the truth." Eleanor took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "It's about his job. Hank was involved in something illegal. He didn't want to, but he was coerced into it." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do you mean, illegal?" "Hank works for the government," Eleanor explained. "He was pressured into falsifying documents. He was terrified of getting caught, and he didn't know how to get out of it." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. "Why didn't he tell me?" "He was trying to protect you," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face. "He thought if you didn't know, you wouldn't be in danger." I staggered back, the weight of the revelation hitting me like a ton of bricks. Hank had been living a double life, not just with Eleanor, but with his job as well. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and the picture they formed was more horrifying than I could have imagined. "Olivia," Richard's voice broke through my thoughts. "We need to talk." I followed him to a quiet corner of the hospital, my mind still reeling from Eleanor's confession. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Hank's condition is worse than we thought," Richard said, his expression grim. "The tests revealed internal bleeding. He needs surgery, and there's a chance he might not make it." I felt a surge of panic. "No, he can't die. Not without answering for what he's done." "Olivia, you need to prepare yourself," Richard said gently. "This might be your last chance to talk to him." I nodded, my resolve hardening. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I rushed back to Hank's room, finding him pale and weak on the bed. "Hank, you need to tell me the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "What were you involved in?" Hank's eyes filled with tears. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. Tell me," I insisted, my heart pounding in my chest. Hank took a deep breath, his voice barely audible. "I was forced to falsify documents for a government contractor. They threatened me, said they'd hurt you if I didn't comply. I didn't know what to do. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Why didn't you come to me? We could have figured it out together." "I was scared," Hank admitted, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I was protecting you." Before I could respond, Dr. Patel entered the room. "We need to take Hank into surgery now." I nodded, stepping back as the medical team prepared to wheel Hank away. As they moved him out of the room, Hank reached out and took my hand. "Olivia, I'm so sorry. I love you." I watched as they wheeled him down the hallway, my heart heavy with a mix of anger, betrayal, and a glimmer of hope. The threads of deceit were unraveling, and I was determined to find out the full truth, no matter what it took. I paced the sterile waiting room, my mind a whirlwind of thoughts. Hank was in surgery, fighting for his life, and I was left grappling with the enormity of his betrayal and the dangerous secret he had been keeping. Richard sat nearby, his presence a steadying force. "Olivia, you need to sit down," Richard said gently. "You're going to wear yourself out." "I can't," I replied, my voice trembling. "I need to understand why Hank did this. How could he lie to me for so long?" "People do desperate things when they're scared," Richard said. "But that doesn't excuse what he did. You deserve better." I nodded, my eyes filling with tears. "I just don't know how to move forward from this." Before Richard could respond, Laura walked into the waiting room, her expression serious. "Olivia, I did some digging. Hank's involvement with the government contractor is more complicated than we thought." My heart pounded in my chest. "What did you find?" Laura handed me a folder filled with documents. Hank was part of a scheme to embezzle funds. The contractor was siphoning money from government projects, and Hank was forced to alter records to cover it up. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. Embezzlement? How could he get involved in something like this? "He was threatened," Laura explained. "The people behind this scheme are dangerous. They used Hank's fear for your safety to control him." I sank into a chair, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. "What do we do now?" "We need to go to the authorities," Laura said firmly. "We have enough evidence to expose the scheme and protect Hank." "But what if they retaliate?" I asked, my voice filled with fear. "What if they come after us?" "We'll work with the authorities to ensure your safety," Laura assured me. "But we can't let these criminals get away with this." I nodded, my resolve hardening. "You're right. We need to put an end to this." As we discussed our next steps, a nurse approached us. "Mrs. Martin, your husband is out of surgery. He's stable, but it will be a while before he wakes up." I thanked the nurse, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. Hank had survived the surgery, but the real battle was just beginning. We needed to expose the truth and ensure our safety. "Olivia, you should go see Hank," Richard said. "I'll stay here and help Laura with the evidence." I nodded, grateful for their support. As I walked to Hank's room, I felt a surge of determination. I needed answers, and I needed to confront Hank about his actions. When I entered the room, Hank lay motionless on the bed, his face pale and gaunt. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Hank," I whispered, taking his hand. "You need to wake up. We need to talk." His eyes fluttered open, and he looked at me with a mix of guilt and sorrow. "Olivia, I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," I said, my voice firm. "You put us both in danger with your lies. We need to go to the authorities and expose the people behind this scheme." Hank's eyes widened in fear. "No, Olivia. They'll come after us. They won't stop until we're dead. We'll work with the authorities to protect ourselves," I insisted. "But we can't let these criminals get away with this. We need to do what's right." Hank looked away, his face contorted with pain. "I never wanted any of this. I just wanted to protect you." "You protected me by lying to me and having an affair?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You betrayed me, Hank, but we can still make things right." He took a deep breath, his eyes filled with tears. "Okay, we'll go to the authorities. But you need to promise me something." "What?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Promise me that you'll stay safe," he said, his voice trembling. "No matter what happens, I need to know that you're safe." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I promise." As I left the room, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. The stakes had never been higher, and the path ahead was fraught with danger. But I was determined to uncover the truth and protect the people I loved. The threads of deceit were unraveling, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting long shadows across the hospital room. Hank was still asleep, his face a mask of exhaustion and regret. I stood by the window, my mind racing with the enormity of what lay ahead. We had agreed to go to the authorities, but the fear of retaliation loomed large. Laura had arranged a meeting with a federal investigator, and my heart pounded as I prepared to leave. Richard had insisted on coming with me, his unwavering support a lifeline in these turbulent times. "Ready?" Richard asked, his voice steady. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Let's do this." We arrived at the federal building, the imposing structure adding to my anxiety. Laura met us in the lobby, her expression resolute. "Agent Collins is waiting for us. He specializes in cases like this." We followed her to a conference room, where a stern-looking man in a suit greeted us. "Mrs. Martin, I'm Agent Collins. Please have a seat." I sat down, my hands trembling. "Thank you for seeing us. Laura has briefed me on your situation," Agent Collins said, his gaze intense. "We take these matters very seriously. Can you provide any additional information?" I handed him the folder of documents Laura had compiled. These letters and records show Hank's involvement. He was coerced into falsifying documents for the contractor. Agent Collins reviewed the documents, his expression growing graver by the minute. "This is damning evidence. We need to move quickly to secure your safety and bring these criminals to justice." "What do we need to do?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear gnawing at me. "We'll place you and your husband under protective custody," Agent Collins explained. "We'll also need Hank to testify against the contractor. His cooperation will be crucial." I felt a surge of relief mixed with dread. "Thank you. We'll do whatever it takes." As we left the federal building, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. We were stepping into dangerous territory, but it was the only way to end this nightmare. Back at the hospital, I found Hank awake, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Olivia, what did they say?" "We're going into protective custody," I explained, "and you need to testify against the contractor." Hank's face paled. "Testify? Olivia, they'll come after us. We'll be protected," I assured him, taking his hand. "But we can't let these criminals get away with this. It's the only way to make things right." Hank nodded, his grip tightening on my hand. "Okay, I'll do it." As we prepared to leave the hospital, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every passerby a potential danger. But I pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task at hand. We were taken to a safe house, a nondescript building in a quiet neighborhood. The federal agents assured us that we were secure, but the tension in the air was palpable. That evening, as I sat in the small living room, my mind wandered to the life I had once known. The life that had been shattered by Hank's lies and deceit. But amidst the pain, I found a glimmer of hope. We were fighting back, taking control of our destiny. Richard called, his voice a comforting presence. "How are you holding up?" "It's hard," I admitted, "but we're doing what we need to do." "You're stronger than you realize," Richard said, "and you have people who care about you. Don't forget that." I smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Richard. I don't know what I would do without you." As we hung up, I felt a renewed sense of determination. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but I was ready to face it head-on. The next morning, Agent Collins arrived with a grim expression. "We've received word that the contractor suspects Hank's involvement. They're looking for him." My heart pounded in my chest. "What do we do?" "We need to move you to a more secure location," Agent Collins said. "And we need to accelerate the timeline for Hank's testimony." As we packed our belongings, the reality of our situation hit me like a ton of bricks. We were in a race against time, and the stakes had never been higher. As we were escorted to the new safe house, I felt a mix of fear and resolve. The threads of deceit were unraveling, and I was determined to see this through to the end. We would expose the truth, no matter the cost. And in doing so, I would reclaim my life and my sense of self. The next few days were a blur of preparations and briefings. Hank's testimony was scheduled for the following week, and the tension was palpable. But amidst the chaos, I found a sense of purpose. We were fighting back, taking control of our destiny. As I sat in the quiet of the safe house, I made a decision. Once this was over, I would seek a divorce. Hank's betrayal had cut too deep, and I needed to reclaim my life. It was time to move forward, to embrace a new beginning. The threads of deceit had been woven into the fabric of my life, but I was determined to unravel them and emerge stronger. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. The safe house felt suffocating. Every creak, every shadow seemed to carry a threat. Hank's testimony was scheduled for the next morning, and the tension was unbearable. We were on the brink of exposing a dangerous conspiracy, and the stakes had never been higher. I paced the small living room, my mind racing. Hank sat on the couch, his face pale and drawn. "Olivia, what if something goes wrong tomorrow?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've done everything we can to prepare," I replied, trying to sound confident. "The authorities are ready. We just need to stay strong." Hank nodded, but I could see the fear in his eyes. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly overshadowed by my determination to see this through. We had come too far to turn back now. The doorbell rang and I jumped, my heart pounding. Richard and Laura entered, their expressions serious. "We need to go over the plan one more time," Laura said, her voice steady. We gathered around the small table, and Agent Collins joined us via video call. "Tomorrow is crucial," he said, his tone grave. "Hank's testimony will be the linchpin in our case. We need to ensure his safety at all costs. We'll have a secure escort to the courthouse," Laura explained. "And once the testimony is given, you'll be moved to a new location." "Understood," Hank said, his voice trembling slightly. As we discussed the details, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go horribly wrong. The tension in the room was palpable, and I knew we were all thinking the same thing. The contractor wouldn't let this go without a fight. The night was restless. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The weight of the situation pressed down on me, but I knew I had to stay strong. For Hank, for myself, and for the justice we sought. Morning came too quickly. We dressed in silence, the gravity of the day ahead hanging over us. The federal agents arrived, and we were escorted to the secure vehicle. The ride to the courthouse was tense, every passing car and pedestrian a potential threat. As we arrived, Agent Collins met us at the entrance. "Stay close," he instructed. "We'll get you inside safely." The courthouse was a flurry of activity. Reporters and onlookers crowded the steps, but the agents formed a protective barrier around us. We made our way inside, the tension mounting with each step. In the courtroom, Hank took his place at the witness stand. I sat beside Laura, my heart pounding in my chest. The prosecutor began his questioning, and Hank's voice trembled as he recounted the details of the conspiracy. Suddenly, the courtroom doors burst open, and a group of men stormed in, their faces masked. Chaos erupted as the agents moved to intercept them. Gunshots rang out, and I felt a searing pain in my shoulder. I collapsed to the floor, the world spinning around me. "Olivia!" Richard's voice cut through the chaos, and I felt his hands on my shoulders, trying to stem the bleeding. "Get her out of here," Laura shouted, her voice filled with urgency. I struggled to stay conscious as Richard and an agent lifted me, rushing me out of the courtroom. The pain was excruciating, but I forced myself to stay focused. We couldn't let the contractor win. Not now. We were ushered into a secure room, and a medic began treating my wound. "You're going to be okay," Richard said, his voice filled with concern. "Is Hank safe?" I asked, my voice weak. "He's fine," Richard assured me. They got him out in time. Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of determination. "We need to finish this," I said, gritting my teeth against the pain. "Rest for now," Laura said, her voice gentle but firm. "We'll handle the rest." As I lay there, the weight of the situation pressed down on me. We had come so close to losing everything, but we had also come so far. The contractor's desperate attempt to silence us had failed, and I knew we were on the brink of exposing the truth. But the fight wasn't over yet. We still had to ensure Hank's testimony was heard, and we had to stay safe. The threads of deceit were unraveling, and I was determined to see this through to the end. As the medic finished bandaging my shoulder, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. The stakes had never been higher, but I was ready to face whatever came next. We would expose the truth, no matter the cost. And in doing so, I would reclaim my life and my sense of self. The next morning, we were back in the courthouse, the security even tighter than before. Hank took the stand once more, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. As he delivered his testimony, I felt a surge of pride and determination. We were fighting back and we were winning. As the session ended, Agent Collins approached us, his expression serious but relieved. "You did it," he said. "The contractor's been arrested. You're safe now." I felt a wave of relief and exhaustion wash over me. We had done it. The threads of deceit had been unraveled, and justice had been served. But as I looked at Hank, I knew our journey wasn't over. We still had to face the consequences of his actions, and I still had to make a decision about our future. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it head-on. The courthouse steps were a blur as we exited, flanked by federal agents. Hank's testimony had been delivered, but the sense of danger still lingered in the air. We were escorted to a waiting car, the tension palpable. "Where are we going?" I asked Agent Collins, who sat in the front seat. "To a secure location," he replied, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "Just a precaution until we ensure all threats are neutralized." As the car sped through the city, I glanced at Hank, who sat beside me, his face a mask of exhaustion and fear. The weight of his actions had taken a toll, but I knew we had to stay strong. We were in this together, at least for now. The car pulled up to an inconspicuous building, and we were hurried inside. The safe house was modest but secure, and the agents assured us we would be protected. "Stay here," Agent Collins instructed. "We'll update you as soon as we have more information." As the door closed behind him, the silence was deafening. Hank sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. "Olivia, I'm so sorry for everything. I never meant for it to get this far." I took a deep breath, my anger and hurt bubbling to the surface. "Hank, your lies and deceit have put us in danger. We can't go back to the way things were." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want to make things right." "Then sign the divorce papers," I said, my voice firm. "It's the only way we can both move forward." Hank looked up, his eyes filled with pain. "If that's what you want, I'll do it." I handed him the papers Laura had prepared, and he signed them without hesitation. As he handed them back, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. This was the end of our marriage, but it was also the beginning of my journey to reclaim my life. Before I could dwell on it, the door burst open, and Agent Collins rushed in, his face grim. "We need to move. Now." "What's happening?" I asked, my heart pounding. "The contractor's associates have been spotted nearby," he explained. "We need to get you to a more secure location." We were hurried out of the building and into a waiting van. As we sped through the streets, the tension was suffocating. I clutched Hank's hand, the fear and uncertainty overwhelming. Suddenly, the van screeched to a halt, and the doors flew open. Gunfire erupted and chaos ensued. Agents shouted instructions, and we were pulled from the van, guided to a nearby alley. "Stay low," Agent Collins shouted, his voice barely audible over the gunfire. We crouched behind a dumpster, the sounds of the firefight echoing around us. My heart raced, and I struggled to keep my breathing steady. This was the most significant crisis yet, and everything was at stake. "Olivia, I'm so sorry," Hank whispered, his voice trembling. "I never wanted this for us." "Save it," I snapped, my fear turning to anger. "We need to survive this first." The gunfire intensified, and I felt a searing pain in my leg. I cried out, clutching the wound as blood seeped through my fingers. Hank's eyes widened in horror, but before he could react, Agent Collins appeared, pulling us to our feet. "We need to move," he shouted, guiding us through the alley. We stumbled through the narrow passage, the sounds of the firefight fading behind us. My leg throbbed with pain, but I forced myself to keep moving. We reached a waiting car, and Agent Collins hurried us inside. "Drive!" he ordered the driver, and the car sped away. As we raced through the city, I felt a mix of relief and exhaustion. We had survived the attack, but the danger was far from over. My leg ached, and I knew I needed medical attention, but there was no time to dwell on it. "We're taking you to a secure medical facility," Agent Collins said, his voice steady. "You'll be safe there." I nodded, my mind racing with the events of the past few hours. The threads of deceit had led us to this moment, and I was determined to see it through to the end. We had come too far to turn back now. As the car pulled up to the facility, I felt a surge of determination. This was the penultimate crisis, and everything was at stake. But I was ready to face whatever came next. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to see it through. As I was wheeled into the emergency room, Hank by my side, I felt a sense of resolve. We would expose the truth, no matter the cost. And in doing so, I would reclaim my life and my sense of self. The threads of deceit were unraveling, and I was ready to face the final confrontation head-on. The sterile smell of the hospital room was a stark reminder of the chaos we had just escaped. My leg throbbed with pain, but the adrenaline kept me focused. I glanced at Hank, who sat by my bedside, his face etched with worry and guilt. We had survived the attack, but the final confrontation was still ahead. Agent Collins entered the room, his expression serious. "We've secured the area, but we need to act fast. The contractor's associates are still out there, and they won't stop until they've silenced Hank." I nodded, feeling a surge of determination. "What's the plan?" "We're moving you to a secure federal facility," he explained. "Hank will give his final statement there, and we'll ensure you both are protected." As the medical team prepared to transport me, I felt a mix of fear and resolve. This was it, the final push to bring down the conspiracy and reclaim my life. Richard and Laura arrived, their support a comforting presence. "We're with you every step of the way," Richard said, his voice steady. "Thank you," I replied, my voice filled with gratitude. "I couldn't have done this without you." The journey to the federal facility was tense, every moment filled with anticipation. When we arrived, the security was tighter than ever. Hank and I were escorted to a secure room where Agent Collins awaited us. "Hank, we need your full cooperation," Agent Collins said. "Your testimony will be the final nail in the coffin for these criminals." Hank nodded, his face pale but resolute. "I understand. I'm ready." As Hank began his statement, I felt a sense of closure. The lies, the deceit, the betrayal, everything was coming to light. Hank detailed the embezzlement scheme, the threats, and the coercion. His voice was steady, but I could see the weight of his actions bearing down on him. When he finished, Agent Collins nodded. "That's everything we need. We'll ensure this information is used to bring them all to justice." Relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by the realization that our journey wasn't over. We still had to face the fallout of Hank's actions, and I still had to move forward with my life. As we were escorted to a waiting room, I turned to Hank. "This is it, Hank. We've done everything we can. Now it's time to face the consequences." He looked at me, his eyes filled with remorse. "Olivia, I know I've hurt you beyond measure. I don't expect forgiveness, but I hope you can find peace." "I will," I said, my voice firm. "But it's time for both of us to move on." The next few days were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and security measures. The contractor and his associates were arrested, and the conspiracy was exposed. The media frenzy was intense, but I found solace in the fact that justice was being served. With the danger behind us, I focused on healing, both physically and emotionally. Richard and Laura were my pillars of support, their unwavering presence a constant reminder of the strength of true friendship. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The threads of deceit had been unraveled, and I had emerged stronger. My divorce from Hank was finalized, and I felt a sense of liberation I hadn't known in years. Richard knocked on my door, a bottle of wine in hand. "Thought you might need some company," he said with a smile. "Always," I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. As we sat on the balcony watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace. The past few months had been a tumultuous journey, but I had found my way through the storm. I had reclaimed my life, and I was ready to embrace the future. "To new beginnings," Richard said, raising his glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass with his. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a sense of hope and possibility. The threads of deceit had been woven into the fabric of my life, but I had unraveled them and emerged stronger. The journey ahead was uncertain, but I knew I had the strength to face it head-on. With the support of my friends and the lessons I had learned, I was ready to embrace a new dawn. The past was behind me, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. I had faced betrayal, danger, and heartbreak, but I had come out the other side stronger and more determined than ever. As I looked out at the horizon, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought me here. The broken promise had been a twisted thread of deceit, but it had also led me to discover my own strength and resilience. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them with courage and grace. The future was mine to shape, and I was determined to make it a beautiful one.